Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to 5 Minutes of Torah. This week we read Parsha Balak, the 40th Parsha of the year, and it covers most of Bamidbar, chapter 22, through the beginning of chapter 25. We're in the second year of the triennial cycle, so we'll be reading from chapter 22, verse 39, through chapter 23, verse 26. The Haftarah comes from Micha, chapters 5, through the beginning of chapter 6. This week's portion tells how Balak, king of Moab, seeing the Israelites conquering the surrounding nation, hires a great Aramean seer named Balaam to curse them. Balaam refuses repeatedly, saying that God will not permit him to curse people who God has blessed. Then a strange kind of back and forth happens with God, permitting Balaam to go and then trying to prevent Balaam from going. When Balaam finally arrives to curse the Israelite, God puts a word in Balaam's mouth, and he says to Balak, Ma ekov lo kabo el uma ezom lo za'am Adonai. How can I damn whom God has not damned? How can I doom when the Lord has not doomed? The scene is repeated with Balak encouraging Balaam to curse the Israelites and Balaam returning from each attempt saying he cannot. Last week, I completed teaching history of the Holocaust at UBC. I've been teaching the course in the summer session for the last 14 years. It might sound odd given the nature of the material, but teaching this course is one of the highlights of my year. It is the most profound and fulfilling work that I do. My mentor, Professor Paula Hyman, may her memory be for a blessing, once told me that the best way to really learn a subject is to teach it. My students reinforce this lesson every year. The difficulty with teaching the Holocaust and genocide more generally is that the events are so monstrous, so fundamentally removed from the reality most of us experience, that the only question we are adequately prepared to answer is how did the Holocaust happen? We focus on the mechanics, the order of events, how one thing leads to another. Why the Holocaust happened is much more difficult to answer. In his recent Dvar Torah for Parsha Balak, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of the Commonwealth, commenting on the rise of anti-Semitism in recent years, compares two interpretations of the Parsha. The first is a Zionist interpretation, which contrasts Israel's isolation on the one hand with its defiance and resilience on the other. The second comes from the Netziv, Rabbi Naftali Yehuda Berlin, who led the Volozhin Yeshiva from the middle through the end of the 19th century. The Netziv read the Parsha as an admonishment against assimilation. Unlike other nations who find respect when they integrate into other cultures, Jews find only malice. Only when they stay true and faithful to their religion and way of life do Jews earn respect and acceptance. I find neither of these responses helpful or adequate. It is not Israel's uniqueness that causes Balak to want to curse them. It is his fear. What studying the Holocaust teaches me is that anti-Semitism isn't really about Jews, and hatred isn't really about the groups it targets. They're only symbols on which to focus our own fears. Balaam, to his credit, is able to conquer his fears. But could we judge him if he did not? He existed in what Primo Levi called the gray zone. He stood between the fear and danger of resisting a powerful military ruler and king, and the promise of riches and corrupting influence of the potential for great privilege. What about God in all this? One of my students wrote a very thoughtful and fascinating paper in which she explored the presence of God in Auschwitz as related in the writings of Primo Levi and Elie Wiesel. What she discovered is that God is present in Auschwitz in God's absence. To support this, she looked at female theological responses to the Holocaust. Women, in their daily efforts to resist the Nazi system by forming social networks and bonds and keeping themselves clean in opposition to a system that wanted to denigrate them, denigrate their bodies, denigrate them as a group, denigrate them, and destroy the natural bonds of society. In that, they reflected the presence of God at Auschwitz. If there was a God at Auschwitz, it was in these acts of chesed. If God was present with Balaam, it was in his capacity for justice. Shabbat Shalom.